Back on my bullshit, man, you can't believe it. Who the fuck you said I should quit?
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But Idiot Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for Idiot's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.
Online retailer Farfetch is betting it can shape the future. This is its concept store, showcasing the latest in retail tech.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers, touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the connected rail. And this is using a combination of RFID and ultrasound. The RFID signal recognizes the product, and the ultrasound recognizes the movement. Take the product off, and then you'll start to see your products appear. And essentially, it's like online browsing behavior. Whichever products you touch and pick up in the store are automatically sent to your app. This is effectively what you've created is your in-store wish list. In the middle, you'll see essentially a hologram of the product. What the customer sees, they control the experience on a touch device. What this allows the customer to do is take elements of products and then add their own style to it. Right, so this is the connected mirror. So in this example, I see my products. I select a coat, and that's tried it, and it's slightly too big for me. So what I can do is choose an alternative size and send a request to the sales associate, and they'll bring that size to me in the fitting room mirror. You'll also see that we've got some product recommendations here. Crucially, the sales associate's able to push items into the mirror from their device. If you wanted to, you could simply use the mirror and pay and go. Your items would then be packed and dispatched to you afterwards.
Do you want me to turn you so you're looking outwards? Yes, please. How about there? First time we came out with B, Jade said, "It feels like I've been released from prison." Do you want these, Mrs.?
Definitely.
Definitely. Right.
Yeah.
And she could say hello to everybody, people she hadn't seen for months.
It's
It's Jade.
Oh. So you can talk to Jade through this.
Hi, Katie. She's there.
Hi.
Every time anyone's seen her, they want to know why she's there. And it's kind of the opposite of when you're in a wheelchair and people see you and they kind of go, oh, should I look? I don't know what the right protocol is. When there's a tiny robot with its bright little eyes going around just looking happy everywhere, it really opens you up for conversation.
You've got some friends here, look.
Hiya! When I saw her for the first time, I remember thinking, this is going to change things. This is one of those points where if this was a book, this would be the cliffhanger. condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that I have a lot of dislocations, there's a lot of pain, and a lot of seizures and whatnot. So I can end up on my own in my room for long periods of time.
Yeah, my love.
A lot of the time, with a condition like my own, of course there's the pain, and the pain is bad, and the dislocations are bad, and the seizures and being in paralysis and never knowing whether you're going to be able to wake up properly tomorrow, that's bad. But what's worse still is being able to count the number of people you see a day on one hand.
Are you ready?
Sure am, I'm just hoping the connection's going to stay.
Yeah, me too. Alright, here we go.
When you're used to just the same little metre by metre and a half window every day, and you've been there for months, being able to just see the sky from somewhere else, or the tops of trees, or a sign, is incredible. Or being able to have that kind of chat in the car that most people would probably take for granted.
I'm going to go past Grandma and Grandad so you can give them a wave. Now, if Jade is particularly seizure-y, she can still take part. And that's brilliant, really, because before she would just be left in a bed or in the house with just her carers. It's quite a small world, that.
Right, so there's one of them. Here, this costume I'm busy making at the moment. When I'm not on bed rest and I'm not just wearing pyjamas all the time, I enjoy being able to dress as different characters and go to Comic Cons and that kind of thing, because it just lets me show a different side of myself, and it's a bit of fun. If you can't go out that often, you've got to enjoy it when you do.
Was that? Good.
It's one of those weird things where I want to not have to use B because I want to be well enough to be able to go to those places myself. Like, it really makes a big difference to me to be able to go into school. But the thing is, with my condition fluctuating all of the time, I can't go into school reliably. I've been in school via B, and so far it's interesting. Still a few little things that we need to work out, but for the most part I think it's going fairly well, and it's brilliant because I can really tell the difference between today and yesterday. How yesterday I forced myself to go into school when I wasn't very well, and I was really tired afterwards and ended up having loads of seizures, whereas today I've been able to do all of the work. I've been able to keep a clear head and not be ill, which means I'm able to be more focused on my schoolwork.
So there is my first step of working, is to simplify root 8. The algebra test is next week.
Now I'm trying to make friendships which I'll be able to maintain with B. Before that, I end up letting people down quite often. B gives me hope, yeah. She's just always there, and if I can't do something, she can. And if I need sort of assistance to be able to make commitments, then she's there, and she means that I feel like a more valuable person because I'm more reliable.
debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The cubicle represents a tyranny. It confines your imagination, your thoughts, into a small physical area. Imagine pretty much every software engineer or finance person being able to, disconnect from their desk and look at holographic monitors on a beach and doing their work from there. That's not going to be science fiction. It's the modern office place.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future. A startup called Meta thinks it's getting there first, thanks to a big bet that it's made on augmented reality.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Meta.
Thank you.
Call it a 360-degree office where you can spatialize your thoughts as part of your workflow for education, architecture, design, engineering, etc.
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality. VR totally blocks your ability to see or hear the real world. AR overlays holograms onto what you already see. Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel familiar.
You grab the hologram instead of using a controller or a mouse, and your brain already knows how to do it. In other words, we've designed an operating system that humanity has always known how to use. So you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball, and now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right? You see those two circles? They get small, and then they turn into this glowing white ball, and then I can move my hand around supernaturally. I can do this with two hands and rotate the thing. I can stretch it. I can throw it back right into the shelving system, and that's all you have to learn to become a modern worker.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors, trading them in for Meta's augmented reality headsets. Mayron thinks that in less than a decade, we'll all be just wearing strips of glass that can project holograms.
In the early 80s, everybody had computers on their desktop, but no one was using them because they had a lot of work to do. So they were still using typewriters. And at some point, the CEO took all the typewriters away and everybody was forced to use their computers. So it's very exciting to see a new generation of technology, a new paradigm.
I consider us like pioneers in the holographic wild. I'm pulling up my browser with my hands and sending out emails to colleagues and just kind of really acclimating to the new environment.
Now you're putting on my computer, essentially. Our digital lives live on our phones. We have all of our pictures and notes and all these kinds of things. So why don't you write yourself a little sticky note? I like it. And go ahead and just take your fist right over the top of the sticky note and close your fist. And now...
Oh, what?
Meta's own transition to augmented reality has run into plenty of unexpected problems. And it's still going to be a while before you'll start to see these devices in your office. But I think it's a future worth waiting for.
If we could see these holograms between us, we will have been able to share our work with one another more naturally, more efficiently, and more productively than ever before. Humanity will have evolved slightly.
This is Hatsune Miku, Japan's sensational virtual pop star. She's released over 100,000 songs in multiple languages and performed sold-out concerts around the world. Her image has appeared in games, on TV, in car races, and is even etched on the side of a Japanese space rocket.
I came for Hatsune Miku, Carlos.
She's Lady Gaga's favorite digital pop star and opened shows for her in the US 3 years ago. Tens of thousands of fans attended her exhibition and live shows near Tokyo recently.
理想のアイドルっていうと、どの曲でもミクはすごい綺麗に歌ってくれる。
他没有缺点啊，没有任何让我们感到不开心的一些新闻。
She's everything to everybody. That's probably why she's so popular.
Miku's creator Hiroyuki Ito and his Sapporo-based company have been developing the virtual diva for over 10 years.
初音ミクとは、キャラクターとしてすごく、YouTube とかで検索すると、たくさんの初音ミクが出てくるんですけども、元々の、初音ミクのその原点は歌声を合成する、ソフトウェアなんです。
Both the software and character are named Hatsune Miku, meaning the first sound of the future. Originally based on Yamaha's Vocaloid technology, Miku the software has a sound bank containing voice samples and a huge array of tools. You input the melody and lyrics, then Miku the character sings them. To date, Krypton has sold 120,000 software licenses at $200 each to fans around the world who use it to create numerous songs and share them online. Some of the fan-created songs are chosen to be part of Miku's concerts, for which they're paid a royalty fee.
もともと初音ミクっていうその、存在自体がそのボトムアップっていいますか、中にはアマチュアクリエイターじゃなくて今もうすでに、プロになって活躍している方もいらっしゃるんですけども。
The company also has other revenue streams. It makes money from merchandising, licensing deals, and concert ticket sales. According to the real-life musicians who perform with Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star is interesting and surprising.
今年で3年ぐらい、ちょうど3年ぐらいになってきて、ライブも数十本、数百本だったの。そういうことが演奏によって起こせるためのそういう器みたいな感じになってます。初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってあり。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいそのテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans, it goes even further.
初音ミクって魂がないので、だからみんな魂を作り上げるために存在している。
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do, just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move Heart Rate Hit Outdoor Running. Let's get moving and warm up in Zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
what does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness. Don't you think?
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
Expose everything you won't admit. And action! This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like, love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh.
But to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What if everyone to girl, Superwoman? I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time.
My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea.
Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone.
Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And the mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers, over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're going to go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and then have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010, and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms, and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad, and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe. And my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oh, Lily, where's the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone?
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name. Maybe this should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She started a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up!
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views, the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
CTE is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CT in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in a laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice.
Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime. You know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, I mean, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left the Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company. And that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW!
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! It's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag Give Divas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to the big stars' entrance music. And their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook Paramount or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves ahead.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. It is Fed Thursday, November 5th, 2020. But man, it's still all about election 2020. A lot going on over the next few hours. We're throwing out the playbook on this Thursday. We're all in on the election outcome. But first up, let's get to that Fed decision, that two-day meeting wrapping up. And the Fed, the FOMC vote was unanimous. It is repeating its plans to increase asset holdings at least at the current pace. That's one of the headlines just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. We're going to break it all down with our team in just a moment, but I do want to get a quick check on the trading day and the markets. Let's head on over to Charlie Pellet. And Charlie, any market reaction?
And little market reaction right now, just seeing a slight move higher on the S&P 500 index. Let me get right to the numbers right now with the S&P up 77 points. That is a gain of 2.3%. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 589, up 2.1%. NASDAQ up 300. That is a gain of 2.6%. 10-year down 3/32, 10-year yield 0.77%. Gold up 2.4%, 1948 the ounce. Crude up down 1%. WTI down 40 cents a barrel, now 38.75. So little change for stocks at the announcement there from the Federal Reserve. S&P up 76, a gain of 2.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Pellet, I buried the headline. The Fed holding rates near zero, no change in the bond buying pace, but this was widely expected. Here we are just 2 days after election 2020. Let's talk a little bit about this decision, or what we really need to see or expect to see from the Fed over the next few weeks. Let's hit the Business Week agenda. Bloomberg News Global Economics and Policy Editor Kathleen Hayes is with us, and she is there in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Hey, Kathleen, we weren't expecting any surprises, correct?
Well, of course, it's hard to expect a surprise. No, I know what you mean. We figured, look, they're kind of stuck with what they've got. Well, let me start, though, by pointing something out, because right before 2 o'clock, I noted there's a very small sell-off today in bonds, but it's gotten a little bit deeper. For example, the benchmark 10-year, which was down 2/32, now down 5/32. The 30-year was down 1/32. It's down 6/32. So maybe a little bit of upward pressure on yields is a disappointment, because maybe nobody expected the Fed would say, hey, we're ready to start increasing our bond purchases. Right. But what they did repeat is, hey, we're going to keep it where it is for now, which is $120 billion a month, $80 billion of treasuries, $40 billion of mortgage-backed securities. And because when, coming into the elections, when people were betting pretty heavily on a blue wave that would lead to a lot of fiscal stimulus, more than if Trump stayed in the White House, et cetera, we saw the curve steepening. We saw long-term yields going up. And people were saying, well, if nothing else, the Fed's got to make it clear that they're going to work against it if they have to. Well, what they're saying so far today is don't have to do it yet. So I think, Carol, this will be one of the big questions at the top of the list for Jay Powell when he starts that press conference at 2:30 Eastern.
And maybe he just didn't want to stir the pot in a week where the pot has been stirred a lot. And having said that, Kathleen, the Fed, another headline, they're going to continue to focus, obviously, and watch the virus. They said the virus will continue to weigh on economic activity. The virus to pose considerable risks to the medium-term outlook. They say the overall financial conditions remain accommodative, and they say weaker demand, lower oil prices holding down inflation, economic activity, and employment have continued to recover. So that's kind of their snapshot picture.
Well, they've been saying, I would say pretty unanimously since March. Right. In fact, you're making me think of when I interviewed Jim Bullard from the St. Louis Fed and Rob Kaplan within one day, and then the next one, and that was just after the emergency meeting where they started cutting rates, and they said it's all about the virus. The unemployment headlines, the payrolls headlines don't mean as much as the virus headlines. I think that started to shift because the U.S. economy is in recovery. The job recovery seems to have slowed down, but that focus till tomorrow, right? Let's see if the economy can at least continue to create jobs or not. A lot of people on unemployment, a lot of people going on the longer term unemployment. So that's still not a positive sign, but that's about the virus. And that's another reason where the Fed would say, until this health crisis is over, we're not going to consider doing any change in policy.
Right, and the Fed saying that the path of recovery, depending on the course of the coronavirus pandemic, they know it, we know it, everybody knows it. But it does feel like, Dave Wilson, come on in, Bloomberg Stocks columnist and editor, watching the equity trade. It feels like equity markets kind of forgot that we are in the midst of a pandemic this week.
Well, it sure does. I mean, you really saw a recovery from, when they remembered last week and stocks really took a hit. And today it's interesting because, the criticism about yesterday's advance is that, you had the S&P 500 up more than 2%, and there are actually more stocks in the index down than up by some of the research I saw. I mean, that was the first time it ever happened. And so today, what do you have? S&P 500 up more than 2% again. This time around, though, you have close to 9 stocks up in the S&P 500 for everyone that's down. So it's clear that it's a broad-based advance this time around. The S&P 500 rising toward its highs of the day after the results of the Fed meeting were released. And if you look at what's going on today, it's a lot of the economically sensitive areas of the market kind of leading the way, notably raw material producers with gain for their index of 4.7% at the moment. I mean, all 11 of the main S&P 500 indexes are higher. But raw material producers certainly jump out at today's trading.
Listen, Kathleen, when we think about Fed policy, is there a possibility? I was listening to a guest that David Weston had on, the possibility that we go back into negative rates, or the Fed will need to be more aggressive depending on where the economy goes.
Well, they keep saying they have more tools. Up until now, Fed officials from Jay Powell, doesn't matter almost who you ask, they're not fans of negative rates.
Right.
They go right to money market funds, for example. It would really mess up that market if you potentially, if you're going to move in that direction. And then beyond that, I think the thing people might start talking about more is yield curve control. Because if you want to officially add a tool, I mean, if you're buying bonds and you want to keep yields from raising too much, that's sort of, I think, is kind of, the precursor of yield curve control. But to take it a step further and to make a target for the 10-year yield, for example, and say we're going to make sure it doesn't go above that, that would be a step. I think the problem for the Fed right now, or the challenge, is that, sure, bring another tool in. As long as there's so many people unemployed and a lot of people don't want to go back to work, or their jobs aren't even there to go back to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, any tool is going to have a tough time doing very much. But in addition, though, the bond purchases, I think people figure you can just flat out increase the amount. But it is, as you started out at the beginning, I think, hinting at, we're in an election week, not an election day anymore, right?
Correct.
And in the middle of all this, the Fed's best bet is just to sit tight and wait for the December meeting.
Well, and the one thing that we're going to talk about over the next few hours, this split outcome that we could potentially see if Joe Biden gets the White House, if we have still a Republican-controlled Senate, that the chance of a big stimulus package is less likely. So you do wonder then, the Fed watching this, and what more can they do?
And he can say, and Jay Powell will surely get, I can't imagine Jay Powell not feeling like he could say today, well, no matter what happens, we still need stimulus. He could certainly repeat that. Mitch McConnell, who presumably may be the Senate Majority Leader, or he may not, depending on how it goes, right, said when they get back, when Congress reconvenes, job one is going to be a rescue package. Now, the $1 trillion figure was on the table at one point, right? The $500 billion that he floated before the election seemed really light. Right. So I think I'm an optimist, Carol. So I think it may not be $2.2 trillion, which the Democrats have pushed hard for, led by Nancy Pelosi, and just lost seats in Democratic seats in the House. But it maybe we get something like $1 trillion. That's not nothing.
No, it's not nothing. There's a lot of zeros in that number. Dave Wilson, just quickly tease your chart, because it has kind of an election-related, I feel like, or administration-related theme.
Well, it does. It's all about private prison stocks. President Trump tried to prop up the industry not long after he got into office. Didn't work out so well, and now you got the election results, and things are getting worse for those stocks.
All right, we're looking forward to that. Hey, team, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Setting the agenda on this Thursday. Bloomberg News Global Economics and Policy Editor Kathleen Hayes back in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, and Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson. He'll be back later on with his chart and stock of the day. We do need to get a check on world and national news. For that, it's over to Nancy Lyons in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Carol. Well, all eyes are still on several battleground states that are counting ballots. Pennsylvania is among the states being watched very closely, where President Trump's lead has been shrinking. The state's Attorney General Josh Shapiro told CBS this morning any mail-in ballots postmarked by Election Day are valid.
My message here in Pennsylvania is very simple. Follow the law, and the law says that these ballots that were postmarked by Election Day and received up until Friday are legal votes, and they will be counted.
President Trump today lost a lawsuit to halt ballot counting in Michigan, with the judge there saying, in essence, it's a moot point since the process has effectively ended. Joe Biden took Michigan. As battleground states do keep counting, a Joe Biden transition website is already up and running. Former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who has participated in 2 presidential transitions, says this is responsible behavior by the former vice president.
You begin to think about the White House. You begin to think about departments and cabinets. You lean in without going over your ski tips. But you never get too far ahead that process of the foundation, which is you got to win.
The head of an international delegation monitoring the U.S. election says his team has found no evidence to support President Trump's claims about alleged fraud involving mail-in absentee ballots. The head of the observer mission from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said, quote, on Election Day itself, they could not see any violations at the polling places that they visited. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It's a special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. It's usually a Fed edition, but it's really an election edition because over the next couple of hours, we're going to bring you the latest on this week's election as the counting of the votes continues, the lawsuits continue, and we're all waiting to find out who will take up at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue come January. Well, joining me today as we go through it all over the next few hours, Kevin Cirilli. He is Bloomberg News Chief Washington Correspondent of Bloomberg Radio and TV, host, you know him well, of Bloomberg Sound on Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, D.C. He joins us from there. June Grosso, also with us, legal analyst and host of Bloomberg Law on Bloomberg Radio every evening. She joins us on the phone in New York. So, Kevin, let me kick it off with you. Where are we? I mean, Nancy Lyons just gave us a good rundown of some of the key states and what's going on, but what are you watching? What are you hearing also from the Biden and Trump camps?
Well, look, I think first things first. It's great to be here with you, Carol.
Great to have you.
Beyond that, all eyes are going to be on Nevada, right? In Clark County, Nevada, because that's specifically where we're still getting some of the vote tallies. Now, last I checked, just before I came on air, I dove into the Bloomberg terminal and I looked at the actual vote tally. And Joe Biden is leading by about 12,000 votes. That's a razor-thin margin. So beyond that, the president's former director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell, he is in Nevada right now and fully just briefed reporters and said essentially they are fully prepared to take this thing through the courts. They're making this legal argument essentially that they believe there's been a number of votes cast in Nevada by people from out of state. So they don't feel that those votes should be counted in the Nevada election. That's what's going on in that state. We should note just the electoral math right now. Joe Biden, based upon the Bloomberg electoral map total, is at 264, which puts him just 6 electoral votes away, a.k.a. the size of Nevada, away from reaching the magic number of 270. The Trump campaign, for their part, they have said that they're going to pursue legal action in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and even to some extent, maybe even in North Carolina. So that's where things stand as of now. Obviously, as we've been reporting for the past week, really this week, we're urging patience, caution as we sort through all of this. But as we get the developments, we'll break them in real time.
I want to get to June, but just remind me, Kevin, DJT, the president, where is he in terms of electoral votes right now?
Well, right now, he is still a couple of votes away. I believe the last I checked, it was 218 for President Trump. So that's where he is right now. But he would have to win. He still has a shot, we should mention. If he wins Georgia, North Carolina, as well as Pennsylvania, that would put him with a path. It's just, they're going to have to pursue legal action. Yeah, it's a trickier path. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, exactly. So, June, come on in. I mean, you watch the legal world. You know it so well. Kevin talked about some of the lawsuits that we've been seeing fast and furiously crossing the Bloomberg. What do we need to know about the Trump team and the lawsuits that are out there?
Well, they are filing a lot of lawsuits. That's the first thing you need to know. And they're filing them in a lot of these states where the vote is still being counted, or in other states, for example, like Michigan. And there are different reasons for the lawsuits, but most of the time they're being turned away by the courts. For example, they tried to stop the ballot counting in Michigan yesterday. Well, a judge said the essence of the count is completed. The relief is completely unavailable. So I think any of their lawsuits to stop the count are going to have a lot of trouble getting through. And also a lot of these other cases, you heard Kevin mention that they're saying this about Nevada, Clark County, but a problem is they're making a lot of allegations, but when they go into a judge to try to prove them, they don't have the evidence to back them. So you're hearing all kinds of fraud allegations, but where is the fraud? They alleged that in Georgia yesterday that a poll worker had put the votes of ballots that came in late, mixed them with the votes of ballots that had come in on time. Well, that was proven when it went before a judge not to be the case. And a lot of the poll observers, actually, they found that they look for things and they sometimes find things that really aren't there because they're there looking. And then today, President Trump said there was a huge victory in Pennsylvania in court. Do you know what that victory was? The poll observers from the Trump campaign were allowed to move from about 30 feet observing to 6 feet observing. So it was right. And by the way, that's online anyway, so you can see it online. So that's not a huge victory.
Right. A lot of it goes to transparency, which is what the both campaigns, to be fair, have been pushing for all along in this process. I do want to bring into the conversation, it's been one of our go-to voices on the campaign and the election. Joining June and Kevin and myself is Bloomberg News political contributor and Iona College professor of political science, Jeannie Zaino, joining us once again from New Rochelle, New York. Jeannie, you and I, we've been talking for a long time. We all have been, but here we are Thursday, and there are expectations that this could go on for a few more days. When you look at where we are in the race, what comes to mind first and foremost?
Well, a bit still trying to grapple with the fact, as you mentioned, that we are now on Thursday and looking like we may not have results in for a couple days. Going into this, we knew Pennsylvania may take until Friday. I was probably optimistic that it wouldn't come down to Pennsylvania. But at this point, I think one thing that comes to mind is the idea that we are still waiting on results, not just from Pennsylvania, but Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina. And of course, depending on who you're listening to, some people haven't even been, quite satisfied with what's coming out of Arizona at this point. So the closeness, as we sort of compare this historically to, say, at 2000, in many states, and the fact we're not just talking about one state where there may be, you were just talking about potential contests, legal challenges, but that we're talking multiple states. Quite a difference, and I think this speaks volumes as to where we are at this point in our country and how divided we are.
Hey, Jeannie, it's Kevin here, and let me just correct something I recently said. Trump has 214 electoral votes. I want to be careful with this. Joe Biden has 264, 6 votes away from the threshold of 270. President Trump has 214 electoral votes. That's where the map stands right now. And you can follow all of our election coverage, mind you, on Election Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Jeannie, you mentioned Arizona, and I want to pick up on that because that has been a conversation that I've been having with my sources in the president's reelection campaign. They are really confident that once the math is settled on Maricopa County, that they will have the votes to win Arizona. Explain to us where things stand right now in this key battleground state that the networks and the Associated Press have called for Joe Biden at this point.
So, it's a fascinating situation in Arizona. Again, we're looking at about 86% have been counted already, and we see a very narrow lead for Joe Biden, about, depending again on what numbers and when they've been refreshed that you're looking at, about 50.5% to 48.1. It's a little bit bigger than some of the others, but it's such a critical state because it has 11 electoral votes. And when some of the, networks and others started calling it, as we talked about on Tuesday night, Fox, and then later the AP started calling it a bit early, that really frustrated the president and his team. And now we are looking to see, nobody, as far as I have said, and I don't want to misspeak because I'm trying to keep up with whatever everybody is, but nobody, as far as I know, who called it has taken the call back, which is an indication that they feel pretty confident. But I do think that it is one of those cases where we will see legal challenges from the president's team because Arizona is such a critical state for the president and his team. The idea that goes Biden, of course, in 2016, you had the president beating Hillary Clinton there about 51.9 to 48.1. We're seeing, if you believe the numbers at 86% reporting, we're seeing almost a flip there with Joe Biden. So I think it's going to be one of the contested states the president's team feels like they need that, particularly since, at least in my view, Michigan and Wisconsin seem so out of grasp to the president, even legally at this point, but I don't want to misspeak on that.
We've talked about Arizona, Nevada. I mean, those two counties, Clark and Maricopa, I mean, these are two of the largest counties in the U.S., so there's a lot of votes to process, no doubt about it. I do wonder, Jeannie, depending on the outcome, one thing to remember here, you understand this process, you've studied a lot of elections. I mean, it's not uncommon, especially if there's a close race, to go and check the count and confirm that the outcome is the outcome.
Yeah, it's not unusual, but I think, the fact, number one, what is unusual is we see so many states so closely, that are so close, rather. And the other thing that I think is a bit unusual is the idea that you would have so many legal challenges. I don't think we've seen anything like this, but historically, I don't think this is something we should be surprised at, because this is, to a certain extent, where we've been moving since 2000. In the United States, unfortunately, at this point, elections have very much moved into the court system. And for a democracy, that is a big question to think about, broader than just this election.
Yeah, democracy can be messy. I do want to mention a headline. It was about a half an hour before we came on air. A Pennsylvania official saying that most votes may be counted by today. So continuing to, of course, count them. June, come on in on this. You're listening to our conversation.
Hi, Jeannie. Well, we were just talking about Pennsylvania. Carol said that they're expecting that most votes will be counted by today. And earlier today, Joe Biden's campaign manager said that Biden is closing in on Trump's lead and that by the end of the day, Biden is going to win by a sizable number of votes. I wonder if you think that's overly optimistic about Pennsylvania.
That's what it's such a good question, because that's what I have, and, we've long believed that those later votes, the mail-in ballots, if you will, the absentee ballots, would favor Vice President Biden, because the Democrats had been so careful to get their vote out early, and same-day voting would favor the president to a certain extent. So I am not surprised to hear that. So it's going to be not just when people voted, but where the vote count, where they're still voting. And I think as we look like a place like Pennsylvania, that doesn't surprise me, nor, by the way, does it surprise me that the vice president is going to get votes out of Georgia as this count continues. So based on those two factors, the when they voted and where they were voting, where the vote count is still coming from, rather, I think it is not surprising that we see a narrowing of the gap. And, I wouldn't want to predict that Biden would overtake the Trump in Pennsylvania, but I think it is possible still at this point.
And folks, if it sounds confusing, it's because it is, right? Because the precedents, and even for us in this business, but I can't even imagine following along at home, because there's just right now threats of legal action, and we don't have really hard data or hard documentation, source material in front of us. And June, I would put this question to June, because specifically, as it relates to the case that we saw go to the Supreme Court on October 28th, right? The case that
yes, the Pennsylvania
the new
case.
judge Amy Coney Barrett decided not to participate in because she was just a few days on the job. And honestly, we might be revisiting that case, which would allow for votes that are postmarked on Election Day to be counted in Pennsylvania for up to 3 days afterward. And that's what I hear a lot of my sources talking about. But the president has even given conflicting statements via social media on Twitter on this particular point. What do we know specifically, June, about that Pennsylvania case?
And June, just got 30 seconds, and then we'll come back and talk more.
It's too complicated to do in 30 seconds. So I'll just say it's very complicated. Let's pick up with it on the other side, because there are a lot of indications that it may not actually get to the Supreme Court, but there are possibilities that it could. And it depends on a lot of different factors. And I think I can get into that on the other side.
Well, let's do that because, as you know, Kevin, as you said, listen, it is happening in real time. We're trying to keep track of all the headlines, and it's confusing to some extent. We're talking about the legal aspect, the political aspect. There's a lot going on. We're going to continue our discussions. Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg News Chief Washington Correspondent, host of Bloomberg Sound On, June Grosso, legal analyst, host of Bloomberg Law, both on Bloomberg Radio, and of course Bloomberg News political contributor and Iona College of Political Science professor there, Jeannie Zaino. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yes, indeed, everyone. Bloomberg Business Week on this Thursday, continuing to focus on the election outcome as headlines continue to cross the Bloomberg terminal. I'm Carol Massar, along with Kevin Cirilli and June Grosso. We'll get back to our discussion with Jeannie Zaino, Bloomberg News political contributor, in just a moment. First up, though, let's check on the trading day. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. Let's begin with the Federal Reserve. Fed officials did keep monetary policy in a holding pattern, leaving rates near zero, making no change to asset purchases as the final results of presidential and congressional elections remain uncertain. Stay with Bloomberg for the latest on the election. Special coverage today right here on Bloomberg Business Week. Stocks are rallying as investors rush back into technology and healthcare firms on bets the election results will mean no major tax increases or regulatory changes that would derail the groups. The dollar weakened to the lowest level in more than 2 years. The 10-year now at 0.77%, down 3/30 seconds. S&P up 80. That is a gain of 2.3%. The Dow up 600 points, up 2.1%. NASDAQ up 311, a gain of 2.7%. Gold is up 2.4%, $19.48 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.2%. WTI now at $38.69 a barrel. AstraZeneca's third quarter profit fell short of analyst estimates as the pandemic inflated costs and discouraged some doctors' visits and diagnoses. AstraZeneca shares, they're up now by 1%. The number of global confirmed cases from coronavirus is now over 48 million, according to data collected by Johns Hopkins University and Bloomberg News. The disease has resulted in 1.2 million deaths. Here in the U.S., the case count continues to rise. Dr. Jason Farley is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
As we move into more rural states, we are seeing hospital surge capacity be tighter. There's less options for that surge capacity, less ICU beds, fewer ventilators, and so all of that may contribute to excess mortality.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. After the bell today, we'll be hearing from Uber, News Corp, Sarepta Therapeutics, Dropbox, Electronic Arts, Roku, Yelp, and Zillow. We're going to be busy. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And the virus, the economy, the race, so much going on. Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar, along with Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg News Chief Washington correspondent, and also host of Bloomberg Sound on. June Grosso, legal analyst and host of Bloomberg Law on Bloomberg Radio. And still with us is Bloomberg News political contributor and Iona College professor of political science, Jeannie Zaino. We want to get back to Jeannie, but, June, I want to let you finish your thought there.
Thank you. So just to remind everyone, this is about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision that ballots that were postmarked by Election Day could be received 3 days after Election Day. The Supreme Court did not touch that by a 4-4 vote, but some of the conservative justices said, well, we can come back to this maybe after the election. So the possibilities, as Kevin mentioned, the possibilities there of that being a Bush v. Gore scenario, the possibilities are there, but there has to be basically a perfect storm of problems. The election has to be so close that Pennsylvania is the pivotal state that the election results depend on. The margin of the vote in Pennsylvania has to be the same or less than the number of ballots that are contested. So in other words, the number of ballots that are contested and were counted, they're being held aside. That has to be greater than the margin that separates Biden and Trump so that it would change the election results. So you have to have all those things going on. Remember, right. Bush v. Gore was about 537 ballots.
Yeah, it's pretty, we're really getting in the weeds, but we're understanding how this process works. Jeannie, come on back in. I do wonder how you anticipate, the next few days kind of playing out, or is this a possibility that we go into next week before we really know who is the winner for the White House?
I would expect that we would know sooner than next week. I would think that we should know if Pennsylvania does finish counting by the end of the day today, into tomorrow, as we were originally told. We get results fairly soon, and I don't want to misspeak, out of Arizona, Nevada. Already Arizona, has been called by the AP and others, and Bloomberg has gone with that call. I think we should know, because depending on who you are watching, Joe Biden is very close to that 270 mark. Now, that's not to say that the president is not going to challenge those results. So I'm not suggesting that we're going to accept that. Yeah.
Jeannie, and I think that raises such a great point, right? Because just earlier today, Clark County Registrar Joe Gloria, he's the official in Nevada who's overseeing all of this in this incredibly important battleground state right now, 6 electoral votes. He's saying that it might take until Saturday or Sunday before the state's largest county, Clark County, Las Vegas, Clark County, finishes their vote tabulation. So they might not officially give this the stamp of the approval until this weekend out in Nevada. So they're taking their time. I don't want to say they're taking their time, but according to him, he said at a press conference earlier today, quote, "Our goal here in Clark County is not to count fast. We want to make sure that we are being accurate." And he went on to say that they still have at least 63,262 ballots, Carol, that they still have left to count.
Right.
And then coupled with all these legal threats that we're seeing coming from the Trump campaign.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So, Jeannie, when I watch this process, we've talked about it before. We're going to talk about this later, that maybe we need a better election process, that maybe the Electoral College has, its time has come. What's your observations on this, and what's the likelihood of something changing?
Well, it's such a good question. There are, obviously the Electoral College is part of our Constitution. There are ways to get around, if you will, the Electoral College without amending the Constitution, because I don't see that happening anytime soon. We haven't amended the Constitution since the early 1970s. In this partisan environment, I think it would be tough to do. But we do have movements out there like the National Popular Vote Compact, which are closing in on this sort of back-end way to get around it, which would be that a number of states totaling 270 more Electoral College votes agree to the compact where they will follow the National Popular Vote winner. So if they make headway there, and I think, I don't want to misspeak, I think there are about 70 Electoral College votes short of that. If they make progress there, if you have enough states following the popular vote like that, then, the idea that the Electoral College winner wouldn't be the popular vote winner would be off the table. Do I think that's going to happen anytime soon? I think it's more likely, if we were to have a result this time where the popular vote winner was not the Electoral College vote winner. If not,
and Carol,
that's not. I doubt it.
Yeah.
Carol, that's where the divided government really gets interesting, especially on changing things like the Supreme Court, because Republicans are looking like they're going to have a majority in the Senate.
Yeah,
and that means that is going to happen as far as all the people have been talking about court packing, and it was such a big question, and Joe Biden was going to appoint a commission, and without the Senate, there's not even a question about it.
It's why we have to think about so many different things, especially when it comes to making change. Jeannie Zaino, you're the best. Thank you so much. Bloomberg News political contributor and Iona College professor of political science on the phone from Westchester. Let's get another check on world and national news over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. There are still several states with outstanding vote totals, including Nevada, which has 6 electoral votes at stake. Joe Gloria manages the election process in Clark County, where Las Vegas is located, and says their goal is to be accurate, not necessarily fast.
Our goal here in Clark County is not to count fast. We want to make sure that we're being accurate. The results in the state of Nevada obviously are going to be very important to the entire country, and that is our #1 goal.
He says they'll likely finish counting the existing ballots on hand by the weekend. Well, President Trump's campaign is mounting legal challenges in a number of states. None, though, seem obviously destined to impact the election's overall outcome. And while all eyes have been on the presidential election, coronavirus infections are surging in the country. Bloomberg's Amy Morris with the latest numbers from Washington.
Coronavirus cases in the U.S. increased 1.1% to nearly 9.5 million cases in the country. Health officials have recorded 100,000 new daily cases. That's a new high. Wisconsin reported record infections and almost full hospitals. Hospital beds are filling up in Florida. Parts of Maryland are looking at dialing back their reopening. Texas added the most cases since August, more than 9,000 in one day. And daily cases have hit a 5-month high in New Jersey. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
A Minnesota judge has rejected defense requests to move the trial of 4 former Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death. He's also ordered that all 4 be tried together. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser along with Kevin Cirilli. Kevin, this is one of those days when you can really tell what's the top story, because I love going to Most Read. I look at what's going on, and it's almost all election stories. But let's not forget, we just heard from Nancy and our news team. You know, we've got 9.5 million COVID cases here in the United States and 100,000 per day. I mean, COVID, it hasn't gone away, and it was a big election issue.
No.
Or maybe.
No, that's such a great point. And even here in Washington, D.C., where I am, the mayor here, Mayor Bowser, Muriel Bowser, has just imposed additional guidance and restrictions even in terms of travelers. And that's still impacting what is largely a political economy here in the nation's capital. Government workers, of course, members of Congress, their staffs and whatnot, and what they're able to do. And I would just note, Carol, I mean, you look at Germany, France, the UK, which is really an ideologically diverse political spectrum, they've had to impose new restrictions. And the question I keep coming back to that I put to my sources is, if this uptick in the United States keeps on happening, what pressure will that face, or what pressure will that place, rather, on lawmakers getting to fiscal stimulus?
Well, exactly. And I think, you know, one of the conversations we kept having, and I bet you did too, you know, Kevin, it was just kind of shocking that, you know, a month out from the election, you know, 2 weeks out from the election, 6 weeks out from the election, that this whole idea of another stimulus round just wasn't happening. And, you know, I think about it's the economy.
There's uncertainty in terms of the presidential election, so I think we're going to have to definitely wait until that hurdle is complete. But then I would note that an uptick in cases and governors having to impose new restrictions could put a lot of pressure on policymakers to pass a deal.
Right, and then you do wonder, a divided Congress, you know, what kind of stimulus? We've seen the range. It could be several $1 trillion, or it could be $1 trillion. Still a lot, but does it have, or does it pack as much punch when it comes to the economy? All right, Kev, thanks. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. A Thursday rally underway. Stocks holding near session highs. Federal Reserve officials today kept monetary policy in a holding pattern, leaving rates near zero, making no change to asset purchases as the final results of presidential and congressional elections remain unclear. Here's Fed Chair Jay Powell.
With regard to interest rates, we continue to expect that it will be appropriate to maintain the current 0 to 1/4% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessments of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time.
Stocks are rallying as investors rush back into technology and healthcare firms on bets that the election results will mean no major tax increases or regulatory changes. S&P up 80 now, up 2.3%. The Dow up 601 points, up 2.2%. NASDAQ up 323, up 2.8%. 10-year yield 0.76%. Gold up 2.6%, $19.51 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.2%, $38.66 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thank you so much, Charlie. Jay Powell also saying the recent rise in new coronavirus cases particularly concerning, so we're keeping an eye on that. All right, this week's voting process, man, we are all over it. It seems like it's similar to what happened in 2016. Has many of us wondering about how we elect presidents, and we're talking about the Electoral College. This story, this upcoming story that we're going to talk about, it's in the new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek magazine. It's about how we maybe need to make America boring again by fixing its dated system. That story reported by Bloomberg News senior international affairs reporter Mark Champion, joining Kevin Cirilli, June Grosso, and me. Mark joining us from London. Mark, it's great to have you here with us. So tell us about our system. Not doing so well, huh?
Yes, I mean, it's in a way it's ironic because this is a country that has the oldest constitutional democracy in the world, extremely rightly proud of it, the Constitution, and yet the Constitution is part of the problem in the sense that this is an election system that has kind of become ossified. And a lot of the problems that many countries had and have gradually sort of worked out over the years, it hasn't really been possible to do that in the U.S. And so you have a system where, just to take one example, we've had a lot of, toxic debate really over voter ID and voter registration with accusations that, some tools for suppression and all that sort of thing. Well, in a country like India, which has 800 million voters, very complicated federal system, very complicated elections, they have automatic registration at the age of 18. You're issued automatically, it's sent free in the mail to you, a photo ID card, which is matched to the electoral roll. There simply isn't a problem. So there's a lot of structural issues like that really come to the surface when the political atmosphere becomes very polarized and the debate becomes, poisonous. And that is really what's happened in the U.S.
Mark, I was really impressed with the system that you just talked about, the automatic registration system in India. But I wonder if anything like that would work here when we're in a country where even with some government directives to wear masks, that there are people who think that impinges on their liberty rights. So I wonder if it would work here.
Well, it's a very, a good question and a good point. I mean, I guess the counter to that would be that a lot of states have implemented what amounts to automatic registration. Other states have not. And that kind of goes to a second issue with the U.S., which is quite unusual in the U.S. Even federal systems like Canada, Germany, India, and others, they have a single electoral authority that administers the election, sets the rules, determines when polling stations open and not, what the ballot design is, and all that. It's done from one end of the country to the other by the same organization applying the same rules. The U.S. Doesn't do that. The U.S. Constitution gives the authority for the elections to individual states. So what you have is a very different voting experience in a state like Georgia from a state like Vermont. And in fact, when rankings are done, where the electoral performance processes of countries across the world are put under the microscope on different criteria, and you come up with a ranking, Vermont is right up there with the best countries, the Scandinavians and Scandinavian countries and so on. But Georgia's, way down at a completely different world, even not doing as well as the Republic of Georgia, the former Soviet Republic of Georgia.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, actually, I'll take that part back. To the Soviets, I mean, they don't have the best record of democracy in the
It's not
United
apples to apples, right?
Yeah, not apples to apples.
But other countries have much better systems than we do. I mean, we have state by state, county by county, and you see what happens. Look at the different results we're getting when, and the different rules that are in place. I mean, I think it's needs reforming.
Well, Mark, come on in, because reading through your story is, there's someone you quote in it, and just as part of the problem is that the U.S. system it's old, that it was drafted when there were no women judges, there were slaves, and California didn't exist. I mean, we all talk about disruption. Systems need to be, revised, made better, and we could do that.
They do need to be revised. And, Germany, for example, is constantly revising its electoral system and its constitution. It's just much easier to do. And the sort of the irony is that, Americans after the war were quite involved one way and another in, helping the Germans with their constitution. But, the American Constitution itself is very hard to change. It has been changed not very many times. It is... at times that's a great thing. At other times, it's an obstacle.
What does the United States do right, Mark?
What does it do right? Actually, it was quite interesting listening to the OSCE monitors for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. They monitor, elections in all of their member states. There are 57 of them, including the U.S. Every member is committed to let these monitors come and look at their elections. And at the end, they say what was good, what was bad, and they give recommendations and so on. And one of the things that they said is that the spirit, so this is the spirit of all the people who are running the elections, the volunteers, the local officials. There's an army of people out there doing it. And the point that they made is that, the reason this system works, it is still a functioning democracy, is that all these people, are, they're doing something they believe in, and that they are, fairly well trained. They know what they're doing, and so that works. Where they said that it falls down,
right?
Well, and no easy feat, mind you. No easy feat.
No, not an easy feat at all. And it's sort of, it has to grow organically. Because it isn't just done by, a single organization that kind of can hone all of its, the wheels of its machinery. It happens, organically and grows up over the years in different ways in different states. And at times, normally that worked fine. All through the 20th century, it worked fine. But increasingly it's a problem, and that's really because of the polarization, and that presses down on the weaknesses in the systems. The places where someone can, take advantage.
Right.
And arguably, you've seen that happen where several states, with the mail-in votes and so on, several states said, well, you can't start counting until, election day.
Right.
Whereas other states counted early and it was all dealt with. And now you have, we have what we have with the president saying that these... Yeah.
Mark, we got to run. I'm so sorry, but everybody should go online, check out the magazine, because it's a great read. I mean, it's a very different country when our forefathers created it, that's for sure. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next.
headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Thursday, November 5th. Federal Reserve officials are sticking to the script, holding the central bank's benchmark interest rate near zero at today's policy meeting. And with more, let's get details from Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Fed officials have pledged to stay put for at least 3 years as the economy grapples with COVID-19. The latest policy statement says economic activity and employment have continued to recover, but remain well below the beginning of the year. Fed officials next meet in mid-December. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
General Motors today reported a better-than-expected profit in the third quarter and double-digit margins in North America's demand for trucks powered its recovery from a slump in sales earlier this year. GM shares are up today by 4.6%. Sources tell Bloomberg the Justice Department is preparing to sue to block Visa's $5.3 billion acquisition of closely held Plaid Inc. over concerns that the deal would harm competition in the global payment system. Both companies, Plaid and Visa, are based in San Francisco. Visa shares, they're up right now by 2.4%. Lots of people ordering pizza on election night. Papa John International saw a big spike in pizza sales. And last night as well, CEO Rob Lynch, however, says he is not enough to skew the next quarter's results. After earnings this morning, Papa John shares surging now by 7.5%. Stocks are rallying globally as investors rush back into technology and healthcare firms on bets that the election results will mean no major tax increases or regulatory changes that could derail the sectors. Stay with Bloomberg for the very latest. Our election coverage continues right here on Bloomberg Business Week. S&P up now by 79. That is a gain of 2.3%. The Dow's advancing 588 points. We're close to session highs, up 2.1%. NASDAQ up 329. That is a gain of 2.8%. 10-years down 2/30 seconds. 10-year yield 0.77%. Gold up 2.5% now. $19.50 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.4%. $38.59 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed, a special edition of Bloomberg Business Week. On this, it's still Election Thursday, it feels like. With me, of course, is Kevin Cirilli, Bloomberg News Chief Washington Correspondent of Bloomberg Radio and TV, host of Bloomberg Sound on June Grosso, legal analyst and host of Bloomberg Law on Bloomberg Radio. And President Trump's legal team, man, this has been an important issue, we know, of this election cycle. We've been anticipating the legal angle of the election leading up to the election, and we continue to talk about it as Trump's team in particular has really flooded states with lawsuits as the count continues. Let's get into what we need to know on the legal front. Derek Muller is professor of law at University of Iowa College of Law. He's taught courses in election law and federal courts and so much more. He joins us on the phone from Iowa City, Iowa. Derek, great to have you here with Kevin and June and myself. So when you look at this, and here we are waiting for an outcome, we know that there are talks of recounts and legal cases. What is it that you think is the most important when it comes to the legal story of election 2020?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of flooding the zone right now with lawsuits. I think about, there's sort of three tracks happening right now, but it's sort of an open question about how many, if any, are going to be decisive, right? So there's the one track where there are lawsuits saying that the Trump campaign's been denied access to observe certain procedures in the election. They won one of those in Pennsylvania today. That's on appeal, and there's some others pending in other states to say we need to have our people in the building to make sure everything looks okay. That might slow things down briefly, but it doesn't really change a whole lot, except unless the observers object. The second thing is to think about sort of challenges to certain batches of ballots. So they've sued in some places in Georgia and Pennsylvania to say this county has had this particular procedure, either with a handwriting mismatch or the like, that wasn't sort of properly approved. They're not implementing it correctly. So those might affect small batches of ballots. So far they haven't, but that's sort of one potential thing to think about. And the third is the recounts. They've already indicated they'd like to recount Wisconsin. We'll see. We're sort of waiting for some final results. Right? We have to finish the count before we can get to the recount, and then we'll see what happens. But I think, with all of these things, it depends. If the Biden campaign appears to be substantially ahead in a large number of states, at the end of these counts, it's going to be very hard to succeed because you really got to get all your ducks in a row in all these places.
So, Derek,
lawsuits were dismissed in Michigan and Georgia, and today Pennsylvania Republicans withdrew their request for a court order in a suburban county near Philly where they accused officials of illegally allowing mail-in ballots to be counted before Election Day. Now, there are the losses. The one win that I see is the one you referred to, where about access to the counting process and could they get closer to watch, 6 feet instead of the 30 feet. Do you see any other victories that the Trump campaign has had in lawsuits?
No other victories so far, at least none that I've seen. There are so many, it's hard to keep track.
Exactly.
But I think, the observer ones are interesting because they really are facts on the ground, right? They are the questions about, was this observer doing something disruptive? Were they entitled to be there? Was it a timing issue? Whatever it might be. And again, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is reconsidering the challenge we just talked about. For some of these other ones saying, these ballots shouldn't be counted, they should be excluded, that they're not cured properly. Those might take a few more days because they're not as pressing, right? The observation has to be happening right now as they're counting, whereas if we've counted everything else and we're fighting over a smaller batch of ballots, those things might come, in the next week. So we'll see about that front. But it's very hard. There's sort of, again, a lot of things out there, and it's hard to tell without getting deep in the weeds on the particular facts and the trustworthiness of the witnesses' allegations and what the other side has to say about whether or not this is normal. It's just hard to sort of make sort of broad-based claims about whether any particular ones look really good at this time.
And just following up on, there are several lawsuits that are talking about and requiring or want more access to the ballot process, as you just described. But will those mean anything after the vote is counted? I mean, yes, they want to get access, they want to see closer, but what happens after the ballots are counted? Where does that leave them? Is there any remedy for them?
So after they're counted, right? So, the observation there is particularly important to make sure that teams are counting ballots appropriately. So, I think it varies a little bit from state to state, but most states have a process where there's already a bipartisan team who's supposed to be there counting the ballots. Especially with absentee ballots, they have to pull them out of the envelope and flatten them out and run them through their machine. And then sometimes there's questions. If the machine doesn't pick up on it, is it because the ballot was torn or mangled or folded a different way? Did they use red pen instead of black pen and the machine didn't pick it up? And then there's some sort of question, well, how do we count this ballot? And usually, again, that bipartisan team reaches a consensus conclusion. And so the observers are there just to make sure that everyone's sort of complying with the law, that they're not sort of throwing out a batch of ballots or they're including ones that should have been excluded, and they can provide that opportunity to challenge. But once the sort of challenges have sort of run their course and the ballots are run through the machine and added into those totals, it's really hard to unscramble the egg at that point, right? Unless you can prove something systemic, fraudulent across the state or in a broad way to undermine the election results, the totals are the totals.
Look, Carol, and you and I have talked about this offline, right? I think you go back to 2000 and that election in America.
Hey, Kev, hang on a second because I want to get to you. Let's finish that thought, but there's a lot going on, including the Atlanta Secretary of State giving an update on the election count. Let's go to Atlanta.
Why they have the 7,700 out there. Part of that is just a scanning differential between the accepted ballots and those were reported. So their actual total is about 4,400 of the absentee ballots to scan and report. And they did have an issue that was asked about earlier this morning. They had a corrupt memory card on one of the early voting ICPs, the polling place scanners. They discovered that. They took the ballots from that. They rescanned those, and those will be included in the totals. It's approximately 400 votes, and that is included in the 4,800. But that's one of the benefits of having a paper backup, is that if those situations occur, you can take care of those. Harris is continuing to work. Lawrence County, we talked to them this afternoon, and they are trying to figure out exactly where the batches are for the 797, because they had thought they had uploaded them, and they looked and realized they had not. Taylor had a unique issue. They did their absentee ballot printing in-house. Something along the way made the ballots not the appropriate size. So if you have a ballot that is based on coordinates, which a hand-marked paper ballot is, and it is not the right size, it cannot be scanned. So they're going through the process of duplicating each of those ballots on the ballot marking devices, and then what they have to do is have to take the original ballot and the duplicate ballot so they can tie them together, have to be marked that each one matches to the other one to keep a paper trail alive of the original artifact of the voter. They will take those ballots, and it's 456 of them, and then run them through their scanner. They are a little over halfway through that process right now. As you can imagine, it's an arduous process. You want to be precise and make sure you get the ballot reflecting exactly what the intended vote of the voter was. So again, that gets to a total of 47,277. On another note, following up on another question that was asked earlier today, we have, this is included in the counts we have right now. There are 17,529 UACAVA, which is our military and overseas ballots that have been accepted in the counties. And as I noted earlier, under the federal laws, the UACAVA ballots that are postmarked by Tuesday can be accepted up to tomorrow, Friday. So of the pool of those, there are 8,899. That doesn't mean that any of them will arrive, or it means that all of them could arrive. We have no way of knowing that number. So I just want to make that clear. It's not there's 8,900 ballots to be counted. Those are ones that could arrive to be counted in any subset thereof. So with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Secretary, can you tell us how long you think it will take for the count?
Well, let's see. First of all, I'm not the secretary. I'm a statewide voting system implementation manager.
I apologize. Let me ask you that question again.
Yeah.
How long do you think it will take for it?
Again, as we've been stating for weeks and months, that with the advent of paper, it's going to take time. We anticipate
All right,
having
you've been
the
listening
count,
to
quote, unquote,
Gabriel
done.
Sterling, the Georgia voting head of the Georgia voting system. Excuse me, I'm just trying to listen a little bit more to that press conference. But obviously, going through the intricacy of the vote, talking a little bit about a corrupt chip, the necessity of having a paper ballot backup to be able to check some of the votes, and also talking about some of the military votes and votes potentially still coming in. I mean, this is what we've gotten down to, count by count. The different votes that maybe haven't been counted yet, and just making sure that what has been voted is certainly secure and accurate. So we'll continue to certainly monitor the counting that's going on in some of those key states where we have yet to call a winner. So we'll continue to monitor that. I do want to get back, though, to our conversation. Still with us is Derek Muller, professor of law at University of Iowa College of Law, on the phone from Iowa City, and Kevin Cirilli, of course, with us, and June Grasso. So, Derek, you're listening to that. I mean, it really gets down to the nitty-gritty, but it does, it makes me wonder as an American, and I thought about that because I actually walked to the polls. I like to see the process, but it does, get to the question and begs, the question of, how safe, how reliable is our election process? And I don't know if you can tell from past legal challenges and what's happening today, but what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people feel pretty confident in the election systems as safe and secure, at various levels, right? I mean, we do the best we can. There's going to be mistakes and problems that happen. And I think, that press conference is a great illustration that, sometimes it's the wrong form of a ballot. And one of the things in the United States that maybe is a little different from other parts of the world, we don't only just have 50 states running elections. In a lot of places, it's really county or sometimes even at local municipalities running elections, and they're making these decisions. And sometimes problems arise. So one of the things they talked about in Georgia is there are about 400 ballots that were on the wrong kind of paper to run through the machine, and so they have to duplicate them, which is they get a bipartisan team together and they refill out the ballots on a proper kind of ballot that they can run through the machine. Compare it to the other one that everyone agrees that was the voter's intent, run it through the machine, and we count it up. So it's sometimes just a long slog to get through this process. But I think, for the most part, we get over those hiccups, we make it through, and we're going to see a total, hopefully in the weeks to come.
I think the 2000 election educated the majority of Americans about the Electoral College and the popular vote. Yeah. And I think that this election is educating people about the patchwork of different regulations, Derek, in terms of every state having a different process. And we've talked about the negatives of that process, but it really does bear to keep in mind about the benefits of that process from a national security perspective. I think back to before the 2018 midterms when there was a widespread briefing for the media run by the nonpartisan intelligence community officials, just as they elaborated upon the significant national security risks that local governments, local municipalities actually face, and that it makes it much more difficult for a hostile foreign actor, whether it be Russia or Iran or China, as we've seen in this election efforts to do so, for them to hack into a smaller system versus having to do it for one blanket, uniform, concrete system. So I think that bears keeping in mind as well. When all of this is said and done, from a legal perspective, Derek, and based upon history, what has the previous elections, what was, for example, the most previously litigated election? Do we know? And how do you think this might change course for future elections?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to think about the comparison of pre-election day challenges and post-election day challenges. And to be frank, I think this election will blow out all records on both fronts. On the pre-election side, right, COVID really did a number. I mean, we had hundreds of lawsuits.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah,
COVID really did a number.
Hundreds of them, right? Now, it's worth, thinking about, on the post-election day side of things. Yeah, I think the Trump campaign, again, is sort of flooding the airwaves with sort of with lawsuits all over the place on a lot of matters. So, in Florida in 2000, we talk about Bush versus Gore, but I mean, there were, at least 30 lawsuits filed at various stages by various folks, voters, interested groups, federal court, state court, all over, sort of challenging these things, challenging various sort of things. It just kind of all got channeled into the one case of Bush versus Gore. That was the ultimate sort of denouement, if you will, of what happened there. So it's interesting in the United States because elections have traditionally been something reserved to the political process, to be frank. If there were disputes about elections, it was really something that Congress resolved. Congress resolved the election of 1876, one of the most contested elections in American history. Congress resolved the tie of the election in 1800, right? It was that sort of a process. But, since Bush versus Gore, we've increasingly looked at litigation and said, maybe that's an attractive place for us to be thinking about how to resolve these disputes, and whether it was John Kerry's, attempt that never went through about challenging Ohio in 2004 versus the recount efforts by Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate who funded recounts in Wisconsin in 2016. There's sort of people have been eyeing, whether or not it's the right time for the next sort of stage of lawsuits. And this is just, I think, as the counting drags on, we're just going to see more lawsuits sort of crop up if that's the case.
And Derek, I just wonder your reaction, because as I keep watching all these many little press conferences from local officials, local election officials, it seems what impresses me is how serious they are, how everyone is taking this really seriously, and they're really trying to follow all the rules and regulations. They haven't found any kind of fraud. They haven't found an election worker who did something wrong or ballots that were put in the wrong place. It seems like they're really doing what they have to do, and that's why most of these lawsuits are going to fail in the end.
Yeah, so I mean, I think at a high level, I think that's right. There's no question that we've seen instances of poll workers who have committed fraud, right? And those they happen. They're out there. There's examples of it. They're rare, but they're out there. Ballots haven't been found, although to be fair, so far it seems like in places like Pennsylvania, they are stumbling across some they haven't found earlier. But I mean, again,
a few here and there, yeah.
But you have to think about the scope, right? Yeah, we've had if some of these states have been having mail-in ballots for over a month. I mean, I don't know how often you step foot into your local city hall or county government building. They're often sort of these older buildings where there's sort of workers who are crammed on top of each other and filing cabinets and random closets in the basement, right? And if you're getting stacks and stacks of mail, it sometimes gets shoved aside if it was back September 30th when you got this batch. So it's sort of all the kinks in the process working themselves out at this stage as we're trying to
also
get through.
COVID.
Yeah.
The COVID problems are just magnifying everything.
Yeah, you don't have the staff in the building who are processing these ballots or looking at them or with that sort of regularity in sight. No, absolutely. I think, but I think you're right. You've exactly hit the nail on the head that there hasn't been sort of an allegation of sort of widespread fraud, right? We don't see any sort of evidence that there's someone's cooking the books somewhere. Maybe we'll find an isolated incident or two well after Election Day, but so far the process, I think you're right. The local officials take it very seriously and want to do the right thing.
And let's remember, for many states, mail-in ballots, they've been doing this for years, so they do have those systems in place. To be fair, though, the sheer volume of the mail-in ballots this year has certainly been something that I think a lot of folks weren't necessarily used to. So the counting continues. We're going to get back to this discussion in just a moment. Do want to remind everyone, it is a Fed Thursday, wrapping up a meeting today, the Federal Reserve, keeping policy steady, rates on hold, asset buying unchanged. Having said that, we're just about 40 minutes away from the closing bell on this Thursday, and equity is bouncing around a little bit, but pretty steady and just off their highs of the session. That amounts to about a 2% gain on the S&P 500. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 546 points, also up almost 2%, and the NASDAQ definitely the outperformer. The NASDAQ up more than 300 points, good for a gain of 2.6%. All right, let's get back to our discussion. So, Derek Muller, if you could change anything to make this a more secure process so that we don't necessarily have this legal wrangling or legal questions in the future, what would we need to do? Because I think Kevin brought up a really smart and important point that as we try to keep our elections secure, that maybe they are more secure, by the states, really overseeing these processes. But it does create then a multitude of systems, right, in the process. So how could we make it better and safer maybe, or more reassuring, if you will, on a legal basis?
Yeah, I think there's a few things for us to think about going forward, and I would hope, the problem is there's sort of the bipartisan efforts, but they often get swallowed up in the partisan efforts as Congress sort of wants to do sort of what their side wants, whether it's voter ID or whatever it might be. I think first, despite the fact that there's this decentralization, the Election Assistance Commission with the Department of Homeland Security and Director of National Intelligence and others have really worked very hard to help think about making sure that our critical systems infrastructure in the United States is secure, that it's going to be resilient in the face of attack, that they're certifying election systems and ensuring that while states have choices, they're choices within sort of a suite or a variety of options. So I think that's one important thing to think about going forward, whether or not there should be some maybe more uniformity, but really more just sort of oversight to ensure that the states are doing this appropriately. Another thing is, as we think about this sort of ballot processing thing with these states, one of the problems that happened is, especially in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, you had Republican legislatures with Democratic governors really fighting a lot about this process, including the process of processing ballots ahead of Election Day. States like Florida, after 2000, really got their act together. They let clerks start looking at the ballots early, not to count them, just to make sure that the voters are eligible and that the signatures match and everything.
Hanging chads will do that to you, right?
Yes, that's right. The trauma was good. If you saw it, Governor Jeb Bush tweeted out, yesterday that he was glad they got their act together and fixed things. So I think there might be a place in the United States to think about some of these little tweaks about, maybe encouraging states, because Congress has robust authority, both in terms of giving states cash to run elections and in its elections clause authority for congressional elections to say, you should start, opening the envelopes, the Friday before the election. Like that's a standard we're going to put in place. And I think some of these standards could be non-controversial bipartisan solutions. There's just going to be a question of whether there's an appetite for that in Washington, D.C. in 2021.
So I heard some people say, I don't remember where it came from, I can't give anyone credit, that the postmark that's smudged is going to be the hanging chad of the 2020 elections. Have you seen that? Because that can be a factor in a lot of these states.
Yeah, and even more to the point, the one case that is still lingering before the Supreme Court is out of Pennsylvania, where they would accept those ballots postmarked on Election Day up through tomorrow, Friday, but also those ballots that don't have a postmark at all, right? I think rethinking how the Postal Service handles ballots, and not just in volume, but in terms of the speed of delivery and so on, is another sort of pressing concern for the next Postmaster General or for Congress in its oversight function. Congress had some hearings where they sort of dragooned the Postmaster General to sort of fight about this stuff late summer. There's a federal judge in Washington, D.C., who's sort of been micromanaging the Postal Service sort of on a day-by-day basis. Those are not long-term solutions, and they're not sort of in the benefit of the national interest, right? So I'm not a Postal Service expert, far from it, but it is something I think that will require a little bit of oversight, going forward.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
You may have to become one. We all
Maybe.
All right, going to leave it on that note. Derek, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Derek Muller, professor of law at University of Iowa College of Law, joining us on the phone from Iowa City, Iowa. I mean, June, you understand this world, the legal world in particular. I mean, do you anticipate that we're going to see changes just quickly?
The problem is, I think to see changes, you have to have a unified government, and I don't think we're going to get that. So a lot of these changes will take obviously the House and the Senate.
Right. Well, listen, markets like divided government, but not necessarily when you're trying to get, for those who want to get something done, it makes it much more complicated. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.